Hey, I'm Nicolia, and thanks for tuning into this tutorial video as I'm super excited to show you the latest iteration of nether tree farms. This design uses a mathematically calculated piston layout to gather not only high amounts of stems and wart blocks, but also a considerable amount of shroomlights too. And even though this design is significantly faster than my previous one, it actually manages to use less materials due to a couple nifty tricks which I'll explain later on in the video. As this version has been fine-tuned, each piston used is highly efficient and well worth the effort of crafting. In total, 52 pistons managed to produce up to 100,000 logs and 3,600 shroomlights an hour, whilst also harvesting enough wart blocks to cut the bone meal needed to run this farm in half. So this farm uses a plethora of technical tricks to squeeze the highest rates from an easy to build layout. The first of these isn't really a trick and is more just straight up science. Recently I've been working on a program called Stemlight, and one of its uses is that it can tell you exactly how fast a nether tree farm layout is, as well as display a pair of heat maps that show you the most common places where wart blocks and shroomlights generate. Using this info, you could set a limit of say 50 pistons for your layout, and then using Stemlight and both heat maps you'd get a layout that's an optimal balance of both shroomlights and wart blocks. If you'd like to use either of the heat maps or Stemlight, then you can find both on the Huge Fungi Huggers Discord server, linked in the description below. You may notice that this piston layout also includes these pre-placed wart blocks. These are used to manipulate how the nether tree grows to produce more wart blocks. It uses a trick called Viden's region manipulation, which I explain in more detail in this video here. Another trick used to increase efficiency is to harvest the wart and shroomlight blocks at half the rate you grow them at. Whilst this might seem counterintuitive at first, what this does is allows you to bank up more blocks in the farm, so when you push them all out, more blocks in the blast chamber are in block 36 form, meaning that they'll have a much lower blast resistance and hence you'll be able to end up collecting more items. As you're clocking everything half as fast, the game is also quite a bit less laggy. And if you really want to work out how few items you're losing, you can use Stemlight to find that the loss of generated blocks in the farm due to the overlapping is only around 5%. Now, using this half-speed trick on the trunk area isn't really a smart idea, as the logs are a lot more likely to generate, and so it's worth it to just harvest at the same rate as you grow them. Also, this means the trunk will get pushed out faster than the other blocks and create this dividing wall between the two TNT blast points, which helps to reduce item damage and actually increases blast chamber efficiency even more. Speaking of TNT, notice how this design doesn't use any obsidian? Well, this is because with precise enough timings and placement, as well as ensuring you're blowing up the blocks when they're in block 36 form, you can still achieve quite high speeds. That said, this blast chamber is only about 80% efficient, and to get any higher, you would actually need to use a more advanced system with block 36 TNT modules. There's also no blast-proof roof in use anymore, which was used to stop the items from getting stuck on top of the block streams. Instead, a self-replenishing roof is made by pushing in blocks from the core, which are only seldom blown up by the TNT. This increases rates ever so slightly, but mainly it reduces build time and cost. To cut costs in other areas, I used some fancy logic to replace an entire TNT duper, so now this farm only uses 3. The third one is a variable height duper, which keeps the TNT trapped inside itself, and then releases it upon the next activation of the duper, and is able to detonate the TNT at various heights by controlling when it gets triggered, which is what this sticky piston here does, as it takes an extra 2 game ticks to power the piston when it's extending versus when it's retracting. As for the other 2 dupers, they use minimal wiring and also feature a new slimmed down design which just uses a bit of dust and no sticky pistons. These dupers receive signals from this scaffolding tower, which is nicely positioned in the middle of the farm to minimize the wiring needed for the duper circuit above it. As for the core of the farm, there's 2 new tricks I've used to simplify it more. Namely the Nylium replenishing system, which has been compacted so much you can't even see it anymore. Essentially, this new system works by bone mealing after a player has planted down a fungus, in which case it won't use up any bone meal. But if the player can't place down anything as the Nylium has been converted to netherrack, then this bottom dispenser will be able to fire and will successfully convert it back to Nylium. And lastly, I'm using this compact item dropper circuit, which shoots out items to the player only when their inventory isn't full, meaning you don't have to build some water stream to recycle excess fungi anymore. If you got through all that explanation without skipping anything, then I commend your love of learning, and in return you'll hopefully have enough expertise to be able to debug issues on your own. So before we get into how to build and use this farm, I just want to let you know that this farm uses TNT duping, so check with an admin to see if it's enabled or allowed. And also there's a pinned unlisted video in the comments below which goes through some common issues you may have with the farm, as well as an FAQ to further help debug any potential problems. And don't forget, if you're really stuck, then you can ask on the Huge Fungi Huggers Discord too, which is linked in the description below. To begin, find a flat piece of land, pillar up 4 dirt blocks, and then place 7 blocks southwards. Then go up 1 block and place 7 more blocks going south. Come back to the first second layer block you placed and build 2 more lines of blocks like so. Make these long enough so they reach where we started at, and then place a top slab at the end. Then you can remove these 2 temporary blocks and place the water here. For the next layer, place a ring of blocks around the edge. And once you've done that, put down another water here. Then bridge out and make a 7 block wide by 13 block long platform, which is one of 4 and will help the farm collect as many items as possible later on. Now come back over to the water and build up another layer of blocks, this time around the entire platform that you just built as well as the water. Also note that for any subsection of this farm, the items in my hotbar are those that you'll need to build it, so you can check that at any time. Here I placed down a row of water, but this isn't actually necessary, as you'll see in a few moments time. So you can just skip this step. But what you can't skip is the construction of another platform. This time it's only 6 blocks wide by 13 blocks long. Once you've done that, feel free to make a ring of blocks around that new platform to keep the water in. If you get disorientated at any point during the build, you can check the top left hand corner of the screen, as that shows my coordinates and more importantly, what direction I'm facing. Now you can place in water at the back of that platform to submerge it all. Following that, come over here and build this strip of glass diagonally adjacent to this wall at the back here. Then cover that all up with another layer of blocks. Now we can get on to making our third platform, measuring in at 7 blocks wide by 13 blocks long. Then simply make another ring of blocks around that platform. You can also skip placing water here too. I got a bit carried away in creative mode with my bottomless bucket of water, sorry. To make up for it though, let's build one last platform, which is just a measly 6 blocks wide by 13 blocks long. And you know the drill by now, build a ring of blocks around that platform so no water can flow out. Here you can place in one last row of water, which will be able to flush away any and all items into a storage system of your choosing. And that's the collection system all done. Now we can move on to the core of the farm, starting by pillaring 4 blocks up and using more temporary blocks, another 5 blocks towards the middle of the farm. Then place a note block and use more temporary blocks to place 2 observers facing into it like so. Now place a sticky piston facing into that temporary block and an allium and another sticky piston over here. Then you can remove the dirt and put down an upwards facing observer. Then come back to the dirt closest to the note block and bridge 3 blocks out and place 2 glass like so. Next, place a pair of redstone dust and an upwards facing piston, with a glass block at the end. Place an observer with a dispenser next to it and a hopper connected to that. Place another observer diagonal to this allium with a pair of note blocks nearby and another observer between those like this. Then place a piston on top of this sticky piston but facing in the opposite direction to it. And place down an observer facing into a solid block looking at this note block with 3 glass placed next to it. Now position this allium block in front of the dispenser and use some temporary blocks to place 3 more dispensers such that they surround the block above the allium. And put a pair of pistons in front of the only open face, which are used to extract any stems that may grow there. After placing a pre-placed wart block like that, put down an upwards facing sticky piston on top of this solid block. Now place down a wooden pressure plate surrounded by blocks on 3 of its sides, like so. Then place the dust diagonal to it, and place more dust over by this observer, with a sticky piston and new observer connected to it like this. Now we can make the dropper and hopper system that feeds bone meal into the dispensers like this. Build up 2 temporary blocks from this spot, and then place a few more rows of droppers facing into the dispensers or droppers with a 5 wide array of hoppers at the back of everything, like so. Then place a T-shape of redstone dust on top of the droppers with glass and wart blocks either side. Place a sticky piston next to a solid block at the bottom of the T-shape. Then put down another set of observers and pistons like this. To finish off this layer, put a lever on this pre-placed wart block and add an upside down dispenser adjacent to it with 3 hoppers feeding into it like so. Then you can place a piston diagonally above this wart block and position an observer 2 blocks above the sticky piston. Now place down 2 more wart blocks with pistons either side of a temporary dirt block and put another observer on the other sticky piston. Then place down the final 2 wart blocks followed by 3 more pistons positioned like so. Now turn on this lever, pop down here and bridge out 8 blocks, 1 across and 1 up. Followed by 10 waterlogged leaves or obsidian stacked on top of each other. Parkour back down so we can finish making the simple fungi dropper circuit using an observer, a redstone dust and a double chest, which you can promptly fill with as much fungus as you want. Once you've done that, climb back up to this layer and put down a redstone dust here with a solid block and a glass block. Just a reminder, but it's extremely important that you use a solid block wherever I use a solid block, and use a glass block where I use a glass block, otherwise you risk breaking the farm. Now place this selection of pistons like so, and from here on out we're essentially going to be building 5 or so more layers composed of pistons, redstone dust and glass and solid blocks. Place a piston in the middle and then more pistons out the front like this, with redstone dust behind all of them, like so. Then, on the waterlogged leaf side, put down some more dust with 4 additional pistons facing the other way. Now, place another piston in the center with 2 more on top of the solid blocks in front of it and 4 next to it facing the other way, with dust placed like so to power them all. For the next layer, place more dust with pistons positioned back to each other. Remember, these pistons were placed in such a way that they harvest the most amount of wart blocks and shroomlights possible. The next layer is a bit more of the same, with dust on the edges and pistons sandwiched between them. This layer, I'll spice it up a bit by doing the pistons first, and then the redstone dust. Okay, last layer of pistons, and here you want to place dust on top of the glass and a solid block 1 block inwards with a piston next to that solid block. Then come around here and place a few more pistons facing in the following directions with dust to power them, like this. And here we'll actually place a glass overhanging like so, as well as that piston next to the solid block I mentioned earlier. Actually, there's one more layer of pistons, but this one only has 2 in it. The rest of this layer consists of this redstone wire and a repeater set to 2 redstone ticks of delay, facing into a solid block so it can power a top half trapdoor. Now, make sure this trapdoor is placed so it's flush with the top of the block. Next, cinematically place 16 scaffolding using 2 on top of the trapdoor and solid block. Once you've climbed up the top, place an upwards facing observer that powers this 2-tick repeater through a solid block. Then use 2 sets of T flip-flops to halve and then quarter the frequency of the input signal from 4 game tick down to just 32 game tick. All you need to know though is that you should place sticky pistons and observers on top of each other like so. At the top here, place 1 last sticky piston and then make a bottom layer to walk on out of temporary and glass blocks placed like so. Place 2 solid blocks on this side of the bottom layer and then put a redstone block 2 blocks in front of this sticky piston with a 2-tick repeater coming off it, powering an additional sticky piston with a redstone block stuck to it. This, plus another repeater and observer, is the circuit that is able to vary the height of the TNT duper we're about to make. Start by placing a piston and observer like so, and then use temporary blocks to position some solid blocks, TNT, and an additional piston. Now wire up the duper by placing redstone dust across the top of it, and make sure this top slab is waterlogged. Now that that's done, we can fabricate the other 2 dupers. But first, let's tidy up a bit and remove any leftover dirt we don't need anymore. Then we can untidy up and place some more scaffolding dirt blocks, before returning to this first redstone dust to place down a repeater set to 3 ticks of delay powering this redstone dust. Then jot down an upwards facing sticky piston with a horizontally facing observer on top of it behind these 2 solid blocks here. Then drop down and put 3 glass on the edge here before rotating 90 degrees to build the second duper, which requires a slab placed diagonally up from the solid block, as well as a trapdoor on the other side with a wall diagonally up from that. Now you can place in a few more solid blocks either side of the slab and waterlog it. Then turn around and place this dust here, which will be used to power the piston that pushes the observer and TNT. Here you can chuck down another piston on top of the wall, and then wire it all up using redstone dust. Kinda like before, except instead of a waterlogged slab, you need to use a glass block. Let's continue by making the exact same TNT duper except 2 blocks higher and mirrored. Like before, place a trapdoor, wall and solid blocks around a waterlogged slab to contain all the water and push the TNT for a precise amount of time. Chuck down another dual piston observer TNT combo and top it off with some redstone wire and a glass block. Also, I just found this nice stone shovel, so we may as well clear out any and all remaining dirt we use for building or scaffolding throughout the build. And with the last cubic meter of dirt removed, that's the base version of this farm all done and dusted. Congrats. I also made a modified version of this farm which sorts out the items and automatically composts the wart blocks into bone meal for you. You can find these in the world download or as a schematic. A fun fact about these is that it uses double speed item filters, and if you have any trouble with those, I suggest joining the Storage Tech Discord as they're experts on all things hoppers. Right after you first finish making the farm, it should look something like this. To easily access parts of the farm to modify it and use it, I recommend making something similar to this here using twisting vines to move the player up and down. To load up bone meal for long AFK sessions, you can place some chests at the back here and fill them with bone meal. Or for shorter sessions, filling up all 3 of these dispensers will give you around 150 stacks of logs. To restock the player with fungus, you have to supply it externally, as nether trees don't directly drop fungus, unlike overworld trees do with saplings. To automatically provide the player with enough fungus to constantly AFK, I recommend making this continuous fungus farm, as it's the cheapest, fastest design you can make, and there's already a block by block tutorial for it linked in the description below. This video also explains how to connect a fungus farm properly to a nether tree farm, as if you were to connect it like this, then the farm would overflow with random other nether foliage. Conveniently, that video also explains how to hook up moss farms to provide bone meal to farms such as this one, so if you really want to run this farm with barely any player interaction, then seriously consider watching that tutorial video after you finish making this tree farm. After you're happy with the amount of bone meal and fungi you've fed into the farm, and you've double checked everything's built properly, by referring to both this tutorial and the world download, you can flick this lever here to start the farm, and then wait a couple seconds for the TNT to start raining down. To plant fungus, hold right click on this gnarling block here, and whilst holding down use F3 plus T, and then take your hand off your mouse to place freehand continuously. If you want to switch out the gnarlium, just hop down here with a silk touch pickaxe, and then break and replace both blocks of gnarlium. Also, for an additional rates boost, you can switch out these lower wart blocks to match the type of gnarlium, as explained before, this lets you manipulate how parts of the tree generate, so you get more wart blocks. And then don't forget to place the lever down properly at the end. If you're having problems supplying enough bone meal to run the farm, don't sweat it. You can supply as much or as little as you want, and the farm will still run fine. It's just if you start inputting less than the suggested bone meal per hour, then the farm will just start running slower, and you may only make 50,000 logs an hour instead of nearly 100,000. If you have any questions, I advise you to first watch the troubleshooting video and read the FAQ, which are both linked in the description and at the top of the pinned comment below. Anyways, thanks so much for watching this video all the way through, and I hope that you learned something new today. Have an awesome day.